2 hours after the party announcing a $30 million trust fund for my unborn child, the hotel manager called. He lowered his voice and said, "Sir, we reviewed the VIP security footage. You need to see this yourself. Come alone. And don't tell your wife." I rushed there that night. On the screen, I saw my pregnant wife kissing another man. But when someone else entered the room, my blood ran cold. It was my own son. Thank you for being here with me. Before we dive in, leave a quick comment. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely betray you, yes or no? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read. A quick note. Some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What matters most is the message at the heart of this story. I stood at the microphone in the penthouse ballroom overlooking Dallas, about to announce a $30 million gift, and had no idea I was signing my own death warrant. I am Oliver Whitfield, 70 years old, and I built a freight empire from a single rusted truck parked behind a Dallas warehouse in 1984. 40 years of negotiating with union bosses and corporate sharks taught me to read faces like balance sheets. That night, surrounded by 80 guests in the Marquise penthouse ballroom on the 32nd floor, champagne bubbles, catching the crystal chandelier light, I should have been reading the two faces that mattered most. Wendy Whitfield, 41. My second wife of 3 years stood at the center of the ballroom in a champagne silk dress that caught every light, one hand resting on her stomach, where my grandchild grew, or so I believed. Her smile was radiant, practiced, perfect. The kind of smile that costs money to maintain. The kind I'd paid for without questioning. My son, Conrad, 38. VP of Regional Operations at the company I built, adjusted his Rolex with the nervous energy of a man who had something to hide, though I didn't know what, not yet. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, Dallas sprawling below us like a circuit board of lights, his reflection ghostly in the glass. I tapped the microphone. The room fell silent. 80 pairs of eyes turned toward me, board members, business partners, old friends who'd watched me claw my way from one truck to a $40 million logistics conglomerate. The air smelled of expensive perfume and aged whiskey, the kind of celebration only money can buy. So most of you know my first wife Minerva passed 18 months ago. I began. My voice caught on her name the way it always did. She gave me 42 years of partnership. She gave me Conrad. She gave me everything a man could ask for. I paused. Wendy's hand pressed tighter against her stomach. A calculated gesture. I see that now. Then I thought it was emotion. Tonight, I celebrate new life. In 4 months, Wendy will give birth to Conrad's first child. My first grandchild. I raised my glass. The champagne tasted metallic, expensive. If this child is born healthy, I will establish a $30 million trust fund in their name. The room erupted. Applause thundered off the marble floors. Glasses clinked. Someone whistled. But I wasn't watching the room. I was watching Conrad's face. It drained of color, not the flush of joy, not the warmth of gratitude. His face went pale, bloodless, like a man who'd just received news of a terminal diagnosis. His eyes widened, not surprise, but shock. The kind of shock that comes when a number exceeds expectations. The realization hit me then, though I didn't understand it yet. Conrad already knew about the trust fund. The amount shocked him because it was higher than he'd been told. Someone else had told him. Before tonight. Before my announcement. To new life. I continued, voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. To family. To legacy. To legacy, the room echoed. Conrad lifted his glass. His hand trembled. Dad, that's... His voice came out tight, strangled. That's incredibly generous. Generous. The words sounded rehearsed. How does a man know the exact moment his life begins to end? I've made 10,000 decisions in 40 years of business. Hired, fired, bought, sold, negotiated, compromised. I knew the weight of every choice. But standing there watching my son's face struggle to rearrange itself into gratitude, I felt something shift. A foundation crack I couldn't see but could feel in my bones. The applause faded. Conversations resumed. A string quartet in the corner began playing something classical, expensive. I set down the microphone and stepped away from the small platform we'd erected near the windows. Wendy glided toward me through the crowd, her dress whispering against the floor. Up close, I could see the diamond necklace I'd given her last Christmas, catching the light, each stone worth more than my first truck. She reached for my hand. "Our child will be so blessed to have you as a grandfather," she said. But her eyes weren't on me. They were on Conrad. Her hand rested on her stomach, in that theatrical gesture I'd seen a dozen times since she'd announced the pregnancy. Protective, maternal, loving. But her smile wasn't directed at me, it aimed across the room at my son. Conrad caught her gaze, raised his glass. Their eyes met for exactly 1 second. 1 second that changed everything. Wendy turned back to me, her expression shifting seamlessly to adoring wife. "You've made me so happy," she whispered, squeezing my hand. I squeezed back, smiled. Played the role expected of me, generous patriarch, doting husband, proud father. 40 years in boardrooms taught me when to show my cards and when to hold them close. "This calls for another toast," Conrad announced from across the room, his voice recovered steady now. The crowd laughed. Glasses raised again. The moment passed for everyone else. But not for me. 40 years in business taught me one thing. When two people share a look like that, someone else is being played. I spent the next hour shaking hands, accepting congratulations, pretending I didn't notice the way Wendy's eyes found Conrad's 3 more times across the room. Pretending I didn't see the slight nod he gave her near the dessert table. Pretending the taste of champagne didn't turn to ash in my mouth. I built this empire with 40 years of blood and sweat. I thought I knew the value of everything, the price of loyalty, the cost of betrayal, the weight of trust. I didn't know that night that the thing I didn't know the price of was my own trust. Something was wrong. I didn't know what yet. But 40 years of reading faces in boardrooms told me when I was being played. The party continued. Music played. People laughed. Wendy's hand never left her stomach. Conrad's smile never reached his eyes. And I watched. Calculated. Waited. 3 hours later, my phone would ring with a call that confirmed every instinct. I sat alone in my truck at 11:45 p.m., trying to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing when my phone lit up with the call that would prove I hadn't. The party had ended 30 minutes earlier. Guests departed in their luxury cars, leaving behind the smell of expensive cologne and champagne. I'd walked Wendy to her Mercedes, kissed her cheek, told her I wanted to drive home in my truck to clear my head. She'd smiled that perfect smile and driven off into the Dallas night. Now I sat in my 2015 Ford F-150 in the rear parking lot of the Marquise engine off, windows down. September air hung thick and humid, carrying the faint smell of asphalt and distant car exhaust. The truck was the first vehicle I'd bought after selling the company's original delivery truck. I'd kept it when I could afford better. Some men collect watches. I collected reminders of where I started. I replayed the glance between Wendy and Conrad for the 100th time. That 1-second look. Victory. Triumph. Conspiracy. "You're 70 years old," I whispered to the empty cab. "Maybe your eyes aren't what they used to be. Maybe it was nothing. But I've seen that look before. Across negotiating tables, in hostile takeover meetings, in boardrooms where men smiled while plotting your destruction." That was the look of people who think they've won. The look of conspirators who believe their secret is safe. My hands gripped the steering wheel leather worn smooth from 40 years of use. The dashboard clock glowed 11:43 p.m. I should go home. Sleep. Forget this paranoia. Trust my wife. Trust my son. Except 40 years of reading faces told me I was right to doubt. My phone vibrated on the dashboard at exactly 11:45 p.m. Unknown number. Dallas area code. After midnight calls meant emergencies, hospital, police, fire. My heart rate spiked. I grabbed the phone. Oliver Whitfield, I answered. Mr. Whitfield, I'm sorry to call this late. The voice came out in a trembling whisper. Please, please don't put this on speaker. I recognized the voice immediately. Hugo Rivera, 37, events director at the Marquis, a man I'd known for 5 years, who had hosted $100,000 corporate events without breaking a sweat. His voice had never sounded like this, cracking, afraid, the kind of fear that makes a man whisper when he should speak. Hugo. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. What's wrong? Are you alone? His breath came fast, shallow. Is anyone with you? 40 years of business teaches a man one skill above all others: how to recognize the exact moment everything is about to fall apart. I'm alone, I said. In my truck. What's going on? Silence stretched for 3 seconds. I heard him breathing, heard what sounded like a door closing, heard the hum of fluorescent lights in the background. We were reviewing security footage from the VIP hallway after everyone left, Hugo said. His words came fast, urgent, like a man running out of time. Standard procedure for high-value events. To make sure nothing was stolen, nobody got hurt, liability protection. And you need to see this with your own eyes. His voice dropped even lower. Come alone. Whatever you do, don't tell your wife. My blood turned cold. Don't tell your wife. 4 words that confirmed every instinct screaming in my gut. Hugo, what's on that footage? I can't. He stopped, swallowed hard. I shouldn't be calling you. I could lose my job. But you've been good to me, Mr. Whitfield. 5 years. Every event. You always treated staff like people, not servants. I owe you this much. My hands started shaking. The phone felt heavy, solid, real. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't age making me suspicious. This was confirmation. Where are you? I asked. Basement security office. Rear entrance elevator down 2 floors, turn left. I'll be waiting. His voice cracked. Please come now, before I lose my nerve. I'm 2 miles away. And Mr. Whitfield. Hugo's whisper became almost inaudible. What I'm about to show you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Click. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone. The screen went dark, showing my reflection, a 70-year-old man sitting alone in a truck at midnight, about to drive toward evidence that would shatter something. I didn't know what yet, but the way Hugo's voice shook the specific warning about Wendy, the apology at the end, these weren't the sounds of minor misconduct. These were the sounds of betrayal. 4 words. Don't tell your wife. 4 words that confirmed every instinct screaming in my gut. I started the engine. The old truck rumbled to life, familiar and steady. Dashboard gauges glowed green. The parking lot was empty except for 2 other vehicles, employee cars, waiting for the night shift to end. 2 miles to the Marquis. 5 minutes if I caught the lights right. 5 minutes to see security footage from tonight. From the VIP hallway, after everyone left. What had Wendy and Conrad done in that hallway? What had the cameras caught? that made a professional events director, a man who dealt with drunk CEOs and celebrity tantrums without flinching, call me after midnight with terror in his voice. I shifted into drive. The truck moved forward through the empty lot, headlights cutting through humid September darkness. Dallas sprawled around me, a city I'd conquered one delivery route at a time, one contract at a time, 1 year at a time for 40 years. I'd built an empire, raised a son, buried a wife I loved, married another who smiled perfectly. And somewhere in a basement security office footage existed that Hugo Rivera was terrified to show me, but felt morally obligated to reveal. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine that had nothing to do with the September night air. He said there was camera footage, security footage from tonight. And whatever was on it, Hugo Rivera, a man I'd known for 5 years, who had hosted $100,000 events without breaking a sweat, was terrified to the point of whispering. I started the engine. The hotel was 2 miles away. I would make it in 5 minutes. What I would see on that screen would shatter 40 years of trust in 3 minutes of silent footage. Hugo's hand was shaking so badly he could barely click the mouse to start the footage. I'd arrived at the Marquise rear entrance 5 minutes after his call descended the service elevator to the basement. The security office was a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and electronic heat, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Hugo sat at a desk with 6 monitors showing different hotel angles. His face was pale, slick with sweat despite the air conditioning. Mr. Whitfield, He swallowed hard. Just watch. He pulled up a file on the center monitor. Black and white footage. Timestamp September 8th, 2024, 10:20 p.m. 40 minutes after my announcement. The VIP hallway outside the private event rooms. The hallway was empty for 10 seconds. Then Wendy appeared in frame. She walked quickly, looking over her shoulder. Her champagne dress caught the overhead lights. Even in grainy footage, she was beautiful. My brain registered her beauty before the horror. A man entered the frame behind her. Younger, athletic build. Gym clothes, track pants, and fitted shirt showing muscled shoulders. Dark hair, 29, maybe 30. He moved with easy confidence. Wendy turned, smiled, held out her arms. He embraced her against the wall. They kissed. Not a polite kiss. The kind that speaks of familiarity, intimacy, hundreds of previous kisses in private places. There are moments in life that divide time into before and after. This was one of them. Wendy pulled back slightly, placed her hand on her stomach, that theatrical gesture I'd seen all night. Leaned close to the man's ear. Hugo adjusted the audio volume. Her voice came through tinny but clear. The old man still thinks this is his, Wendy said. She laughed. By January, we'll have everything. The man, Nico Delaney, 29, personal trainer at Prestige Fitness, appeared in the hotel hallway security footage with Wendy pressed against the wall. His hand on the small of her back kissed her neck. Who is that man? My voice came out hollow, distant. His name is Nico Delaney, Hugo whispered. Personal trainer at Prestige Fitness. Your wife's regular appointments. 3 times a week for 8 months. 8 months. The affair had run 8 months. The pregnancy announcement came 6 weeks ago. The math assembled itself with brutal clarity. The child growing in Wendy's stomach wasn't mine, wasn't Conrad's. Was this trainer's, this 29-year-old man who sold his body for hourly rates and apparently sold his silence for more. I sat frozen. My hands gripped the armrests. The fabric was rough, worn smooth by previous occupants. I focused on that texture because if I didn't focus on something physical, I would fall apart. There's more, Hugo said quietly. On screen, Nico pulled away from Wendy, checked his watch, looked nervous. Wendy straightened her dress, touched her hair, prepared to return to the party. A third figure entered the frame. Conrad, my son. still wearing his expensive suit, still wearing the event name tag I'd personally handed him that morning. He walked into frame with confident stride. Wendy saw him, smiled, kissed his cheek like a dutiful stepmother. Then she left the frame. Conrad and Nico remained. My son reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick manila envelope, handed it to Nico. Nico opened it, thumbed through cash. A lot of cash. His eyes widened. He nodded. Would vanish until the baby is registered under my father's name. Conrad's voice came through the audio, clear and businesslike. Keep your mouth shut, do your gym sessions with Wendy like normal, and you'll get the other $50,000 after the birth. $50,000. My son was paying $50,000 to cover up my wife's affair with my money. Your son knew, Hugo said quietly. He didn't just know, I heard myself say. He paid for it. Conrad patted Nico's shoulder on the footage, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times the way men seal business deals. I'd taught him that gesture, taught him how to negotiate, how to read people, how to identify leverage and exploit weakness. I taught my son everything, and he used every lesson to orchestrate my destruction. Nico pocketed the envelope. They shook hands. Conrad checked his watch, the Rolex I'd given him for his 30th birthday, and walked out of frame. Toward the party, toward me, toward the room where he'd stood and smiled and toasted my generosity while knowing the entire announcement was built on fraud. Nico waited 30 seconds, then left in the opposite direction. The hallway returned to empty silence. Hugo stopped the footage. Timestamp frozen 10:27 p.m. 7 minutes that destroyed 40 years of trust. I'm sorry, Hugo whispered. I'm so sorry. I couldn't speak. My brain cycled through implications like a spreadsheet calculating loss. Wendy's pregnancy wasn't mine. The child I'd promised $30 million to wasn't my grandchild. Conrad wasn't being fooled, he was orchestrating. My wife and son were conspirators. The affair had run 8 months. The payment was $50,000, now $50,000 after birth. $100,000 total to buy silence from a man who'd impregnated my wife. And the glance I'd seen tonight, that triumphant look between Wendy and Conrad, that was the look of people who'd just secured $30 million through fraud. Can you copy this footage? My voice came out steady, cold. The voice I used in hostile negotiations. Already done. Hugo handed me a USB drive. 3 copies. This is yours. I kept one. I sent one to my personal email. You could lose your job for this. Some things matter more than jobs, Mr. Whitfield. He met my eyes. You treated me like a human being for 5 years. That matters. I sat there in the dark, watching footage of the son I taught to ride a bicycle, paying money to cover up his stepmother's pregnancy with another man's child. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt something inside my chest turn to stone, the part of me that had been a father, a husband, a man who believed in family. That part died in a basement security office at midnight, watching my life revealed as a carefully constructed lie. But the footage wasn't the only evidence I needed. I had to go home and face them both without revealing what I knew. I stepped through my front door at 1:30 in the morning and hugged the woman who was planning to inherit my fortune, and she had no idea I knew. The drive home from the Marquis had taken 20 minutes. 20 minutes to transition from devastated husband to calculating strategist. 20 minutes to decide my next move. I wouldn't confront. I wouldn't rage. I would act. This was war, and the first rule of war is never reveal what you know. Wendy waited in the living room, wearing a silk nightgown, cream-colored and expensive, the kind that cost more than my first truck. Soft light from the table lamp cast shadows across her face. She looked worried, Eyebrows drawn together, hands clasped, the perfect portrait of concerned wife. "Where were you?" She crossed the room, quickly barefoot on marble floors. "I was worried sick. The party ended hours ago." I set my keys on the entry table, smiled. The smile felt natural because I'd spent 40 years smiling at people I wanted to destroy. I got caught up with the board members at the hotel bar, I said, loosening my tie. "You know how Henderson gets when he's had scotch, wanted to discuss Q4 projections until I thought my ears would fall off." The lie came easy, smooth, believable. I'd negotiated billion-dollar contracts with less preparation. Wendy touched my face. Her hand was warm, soft, perfectly manicured. "Your heart is racing," she said. "I can feel your pulse." She pressed herself against me, wrapped her arms around my chest, laid her ear against my heart. Once that gesture had melted me. The intimacy of it, the vulnerability. My second wife listening to my heartbeat in the quiet of our home, her hand resting on the small swell of stomach where my grandchild grew. Now I felt nothing but cold calculation. Was this performance? Or was she checking if my heart was weakening, if whatever they were doing to me was working? The tender gesture transformed into something clinical, diagnostic, strategic. "Come to bed," she whispered against my chest. "You need rest." I kissed the top of her head. She smelled of lavender and expensive shampoo. "You're right. Long day. Acting is easy when you've spent 40 years negotiating with people who smile while planning to destroy you." We walked upstairs together, her hand in mine, her body pressed close. She talked about baby names, nursery colors, how excited Conrad was to be a father. I made appropriate sounds of agreement. My brain calculated evidence timelines, legal strategy. She fell asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and even. I lay awake staring at the ceiling until dawn, the USB drive from Hugo burning in my jacket pocket downstairs. At 7 a.m., I went to the kitchen. Della Dawson, 64, had been our housekeeper since 2006, moving through the kitchen with the invisible efficiency of someone who knew every secret of the house, though I was only beginning to realize how many secrets that included. She was a small woman, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, hands worn from decades of work. She'd been with us through Minerva's illness, through the funeral, through my marriage to Wendy. 2 identical green smoothies sat on the granite counter. The morning sun through the bay window made them glow an unnatural color. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield," Della said without turning around. She was rinsing blueberries in the sink. "Your usual smoothie. Extra kale this morning, just how Mrs. Whitfield requested." I watched her reflection in the window. Her eyes flicked to the smoothies, then to me, then back to the blueberries. "Thank you, Della." I walked closer, studying the 2 glasses. Identical, same green color, same level of liquid. "You've been with us a long time. 18 years, sir." Her voice softened. "Since Mrs. Minerva hired me." Minerva, my first wife, the woman who'd built this empire beside me, who'd trusted Della with our home, our lives, our secrets. I turned to grab my pill box from the counter where I kept my daily medications. Blood pressure, cholesterol, baby aspirin. The routine I'd followed for 15 years. In my peripheral vision, Della moved. Quick, practiced. She switched the 2 smoothie glasses. My hand froze on the pillbox. She thought I hadn't seen, thought I was distracted. But I'd spent 40 years watching for the small movements that reveal big intentions. The slight shift of eyes before a lie. The tensing of shoulders before a betrayal. The quick switch of 2 identical glasses. I said nothing. Picked up the pillbox. Opened it. The pill was pale blue yesterday. Today it was darker, just slightly, just enough. My heart medication. The pill I'd taken every morning for 15 years since my minor cardiac event in 2009. Same prescription, same pharmacy, same color. Except today it wasn't. The difference was subtle. Most people would never notice. But I'd made my fortune noticing what others missed: the decimal point error in a contract, the hesitation before a handshake, the color shift in a pill that should never change. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Della's voice came from behind me. Careful, controlled. I turned, looked at her directly. Her eyes met mine for 1 second, then dropped to the floor. "No, Della, thank you." I picked up the switched smoothie glass, the one she'd moved when she thought I wasn't looking. Held it up to the light. The green liquid was opaque, impossible to see through. Could be vitamins, could be poison, could be antidote. I didn't drink it. I picked up the pill. The color was wrong. Only slightly wrong, the kind of wrong most people would never notice. But in business, I learned that things that are only slightly wrong are usually signs of a very big problem. I didn't know if Della was trying to kill me or save me. But I knew one thing: I needed answers before I swallowed anything in this house again. And the only way to get answers was to start investigating, starting with the one person who might tell me the truth: my lawyer. At 6 a.m. on September 10th, I sat in my dark study and activated the protocol I'd hoped I would never need, the one designed to survive a total betrayal. I'd left the kitchen with the switched smoothie untouched, walked upstairs, locked myself in my private study, the room where I'd built my empire through 40 years of contracts and calculations. The room smelled of leather and old books, wood polish, and decades of decisions. My handwritten list sat before me on the desk: security footage affair, fake pregnancy, switched medication, embezzlement. Evidence was one thing. Weaponizing it was another. I picked up my phone, dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but never needed until now. Zandra Gallagher, 47, my corporate attorney for 12 years, answered on the first ring. Despite the early hour, her voice already sharp and ready for whatever crisis had finally arrived. "I need you to listen carefully," I said. Protocol Omega. Silence. 3 seconds of it. Those 2 words changed everything between us. Protocol Omega was the nuclear option, the contingency plan we'd designed 12 years ago for total corporate collapse, hostile takeover, or catastrophic betrayal. A pre-built legal weapon so comprehensive it could freeze assets, lock accounts, and initiate warfare before the enemy knew the battle had started. I'd always been a strategic thinker who prepared for worst-case scenarios. This was the worst case. "What's the severity level?" Her voice came out tight, controlled. "An attempted murder and conspiracy to defraud," I said. The words tasted like metal. "But I need 7 days before police know anything." "Can you give me 7 days? 7 days. In business, 7 days can be an eternity or a heartbeat. It depends on what you do with them." 7 days. She processed this. I heard papers rustling, a chair creaking, the sound of someone who'd just shifted from sleep mode to war mode in 30 seconds. "I need to hear everything." "Start from the beginning," I told her. All of it. The glance at the party, the security footage, Wendy's affair with the trainer, Conrad's cash payment, the switched smoothie, the wrong-colored pills. Every detail poured out in clinical, organized precision, the way I'd present evidence in a hostile board meeting. Zandra listened without interrupting. When I finished, another silence stretched. "The pregnancy announcement was 6 weeks ago," she said finally. "But if the affair ran 8 months, this was planned long before." "I know, and your son is paying the biological father to stay silent." "I know, which means Conrad wants your money, not your life. But someone is tampering with your medication. That's attempted murder." "I know." My hands gripped the phone tighter. "I need you to freeze everything: assets, accounts, corporate shares. Do it invisibly. No alerts, no notifications. I need them to think they've won while I build the case. 7 days, Zandra said. Starting now. Don't consume anything prepared in that house. Don't trust anyone except me. And document everything, every conversation, every interaction, every detail. A pause. I'll send a courier this week with a few items. Tools for the final stage. You'll know when to use them. Already doing that? She's good. Her voice hardened. Because when we move, we're going to destroy them so completely, they'll never see daylight again. I hung up. The sun was rising through the study window, painting Dallas in shades of gold and shadow. Beautiful and deadly, like everything in my life had become. At 2 p.m., I drove to the main warehouse for what looked like a routine inspection. Maintaining normal appearances, playing the role of engaged CEO, while my attorney built a legal fortress behind the scenes. The warehouse smelled of diesel fuel and cardboard forklift exhaust and concrete. I'd spent 40 years in places like this, loading docks and freight terminals, the real backbone of logistics that happened far from corner offices. Cedric Fields, 51, former director of Gulf Coast operations, was loading cardboard boxes into his aging Toyota when I arrived, a man who'd spent 22 years building my company, fired for refusing to commit fraud. I'd heard about his termination 3 months ago. Conrad's brief explanation, uncooperative, resistant to new efficiency protocols, needed younger leadership. I trusted my son's judgment. Now I saw the truth. Mr. Whitfield. Cedric straightened, surprised, embarrassed. A man caught packing his career into boxes in broad daylight. I was just clearing out my locker. 3 months later, I asked. Took me a while to accept it was really over. He set down a box marked personal items. 22 years. Hard to let go. I looked at the boxes, at his worn work boots, at the Toyota with 200,000 miles on the odometer, at the difference between a man who'd built something real and a man who'd stolen it. Why did Conrad fire you, Cedric? The real reason. He met my eyes, calculated risk, then decided truth was worth the gamble. Your son wanted me to sign off on transportation manifests for shell companies that didn't exist, he said quietly. Moving phantom freight to justify millions in fake invoicing. I refused. Got fired next day. The words hit like physical blows. How long had he been running the phantom shipments? At least 18 months that I found. Could be longer. Cedric's voice carried quiet dignity. No anger, just facts. I documented everything before they locked me out of the system. Kept copies. Figured someday someone might ask. 18 months. The conspiracy didn't start with Wendy's pregnancy. It had been running for over a year before that. The affair, the embezzlement, the manipulation, all of it predated the announcement that finally opened my eyes. I know you did the right thing, Cedric, I said, extending my hand. That matters. We shook. His grip was firm, calloused, honest. The handshake of a man who'd worked with his hands and refused to dirty them. I stood watching him drive out of the parking lot, his old Toyota trunk carrying a box of personal items from 22 years of service. I stood in that warehouse looking at the empty parking space where an honest man had just driven away after losing his career for refusing to lie. Then I thought about my son sitting in a corner office upstairs, wearing expensive suits bought with stolen money. I thought of the difference between a man with honor and a man with money. And I decided which one would still be standing when this was over. But first I needed to know exactly how deep the embezzlement went, and that meant pulling the real books. The numbers didn't lie. 4 shell companies, 18 months of phantom transactions, $7 million stolen, and my son's signature on every single transfer authorization. I'd waited until 7 p.m. after the accounting department emptied out for the day. The floor was silent except for the hum of computer servers and fluorescent lights. Margaret Brennan, 58, chief accountant for 23 years, had kept duplicate books off the server in old-school ledgers, the kind of cautious professionalism that had just saved my life. She pulled 3 leather-bound ledgers from a locked cabinet in her office, laying them across her desk, like evidence at a crime scene. The smell of ink and paper filled the small space. "I kept duplicate books off the server," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "Old school, in case something like this happened. You knew, I suspected." Her fingers traced one of the ledger entries. "When Mr. Conrad started creating new vendor accounts without board approval, I flagged it internally. He told me you'd authorized everything verbally. Said you were getting forgetful mixing up meetings. Forgetful. The word tasted bitter. How long has he been stealing? In 18 months that I can prove. Maybe longer." She opened the first ledger. Rows of transactions filled the pages in her precise handwriting. 4 shell companies with legitimate-sounding names: Gulf States Transport, Meridian Logistics Solutions, Apex Freight Services, Continental Carriers Group. Each one invoiced us for services never performed. Freight routes that don't exist. Trucks that were never loaded. I scanned the numbers. Each transaction stayed under $50,000, small enough to avoid automated fraud detection, large enough to add up fast. Over 18 months, the theft totaled $7 million. $7 million. 18 months. 4 fake companies. My son, the systematic thief. Every authorization has his signature," Margaret said, flipping pages. "He approved the invoices as VP of Regional Operations, processed the payments himself through accounts payable, received the money in offshore accounts registered to the shell companies." My hands gripped the edge of her desk. The wood was smooth, worn by decades of use. Real. Solid. Unlike everything else in my life. "He didn't plan to wait for inheritance," I said slowly, the realization crystallizing. "He already stole the money. He needs me dead to erase the only witness who could expose the fraud." Margaret nodded. "If you die of natural causes, heart attack, stroke, age-related decline, no one investigates the books. The embezzlement gets buried with you. Conrad becomes grieving son, takes over company leadership, continues the fraud, or covers his tracks permanently." The clinical logic was flawless. Cruel. The kind of long-term planning I'd taught him during 20 years of business mentorship. I photographed every page of the ledgers with my phone. Evidence, documentation, ammunition. "Thank you, Margaret," I said. "This stays between us. Tell no one." "Yeah, understood." She closed the ledgers carefully. "For what it's worth, your first wife would have been proud of how you're handling this. Mrs. Minerva always said you were strongest when you were cornered." Minerva, the mention of her name was a small comfort in the darkness. I left the building at 8 p.m., drove home, pretended everything was normal through another dinner with Wendy and her theatrical pregnancy performance. Slept 3 hours, woke at dawn. At 9 a.m. on September 11th, I walked into Apex Diagnostics, carrying the mismatched pill in a sealed evidence bag. Dr. Raymond Corbett, 52, independent toxicologist at Apex Diagnostics, held the pill under a magnifying glass with the careful precision of a man who'd testified in court about poison more times than he cared to remember. His office smelled of antiseptic and metal, the clinical scent of laboratories where truth came in chemical analysis. "This isn't digoxin," he said after 10 minutes of examination. "Not even close." "What is it?" "Give me 2 hours for full spectroscopy." He sealed the pill in a testing container. "Wait in the consultation room. I'll have answers." I sat in a sterile room with white walls and medical posters about cardiovascular health. Drank bitter coffee from a paper cup. Watched the clock tick forward with agonizing slowness. Dr. Corbett returned at 11:15 with a lab report. "This isn't poison. he said, sitting across from me. It's a cognitive suppressant, causes confusion, memory loss, disorientation, dizziness. Non-lethal, but incapacitating. The words took 3 seconds to process. They're not trying to kill me. Not yet. He handed me the report. They're trying to make you legally incompetent first. This medication creates symptoms that mimic early-stage dementia or age-related cognitive decline, short-term memory loss, difficulty with familiar tasks, confusion about time and place, getting lost on routine trips. Every symptom he listed I'd experienced in the past 6 months. The forgotten partner names, getting lost driving to the warehouse I'd visited for 40 years, the dizzy spells during board meetings, the moments where time felt elastic and wrong. Every time I forgot a name, got lost, felt dizzy. I said slowly, I thought I was getting old. They were drugging me. It's a classic gaslighting combined with pharmacological manipulation, Dr. Corbett said. Create real symptoms, document them. Use the medical evidence to petition court for financial guardianship due to cognitive incompetence. Once they control your assets legally, Phase 2 begins. Phase 2 will murder, but only after your money is safely under their guardianship. This way, they inherit everything legally, no contested wills, no suspicious timing, no questions. They didn't just want me dead. They wanted me discredited, declared incompetent, stripped of dignity before the final act. The surgical precision of it was breathtaking, monstrous. The kind of multi-phase plan that required months of preparation, medical conspiracy, legal groundwork. How long have I been taking this? I asked. Based on symptom progression, you described at least 3 to 4 months, possibly longer. 3 months. Long enough to build a medical history. Long enough to create documented evidence of decline. Long enough to make guardianship seem reasonable, compassionate, even protecting a failing patriarch from his own deteriorating mind. I sat in that sterile examination room, holding a pill that had stolen months of my mind, understanding the full scope of their plan for the first time. They didn't just want to kill me. They wanted me insane first, legally declared, incompetent assets, transferred to guardianship, reputation, destroyed. Then, when I was powerless and isolated, they would finish the job. But they had made one mistake. They thought the pills were working. And I was about to show them the difference between seeming weak and being weak. Xandra slid the medical report across her desk, and I understood why going to the police would be suicide. They'd built a cage around me first. Showing weakness was part of the strategy. Let them think the pills were working. Let them believe I was confused, forgetful, deteriorating. Meanwhile, I built evidence they didn't know existed. I'd driven to Xandra's law office at 2 p.m. on September 11th. Her office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown building, windows overlooking Dallas like a war room surveying the battlefield. The space smelled of leather and coffee, legal documents stacked in precise towers across her desk. My investigator pulled this from Dr. Vernon Valdez's office server, she said, tapping the document. Read it. The medical report was dated 2 weeks ago. Detailed observations of my behavior over the past 3 months. Missed appointments. Confusion during routine conversations. Getting lost, driving familiar routes. Paranoid statements about family members. Final diagnosis, significant cognitive decline, consistent with early-stage dementia, paranoid delusions, no longer competent to manage financial affairs or make sound decisions. Dr. Vernon Valdez's signature sat at the bottom, official and damning. This was never filed, Xandra said. It's sitting in a secure folder marked Contingency Protocol. The realization hit like ice water. They built a cage. If I speak out, they use this to prove I'm crazy. Exactly. Xandra leaned forward. You go to police claiming your wife is having an affair, your son is stealing millions, someone's poisoning you, they pull this report. Show documented medical evidence of paranoid delusions. Every accusation you make becomes a symptom. Every piece of evidence you present gets dismissed as the confused ravings of a sick old man. They'd built the cage so carefully, I hadn't noticed the bars until I tried to walk through them. Dr. Valdez is part of the conspiracy, I said. The pieces assembled themselves with brutal clarity. He prescribed the cognitive suppressants, documented the fake symptoms they caused, created medical evidence to use against me if I fought back. See, medical, legal, and financial conspiracy. Zandra confirmed. They've covered every angle. This is why Protocol Omega must be silent, why we need 7 days without police involvement, why we need irrefutable evidence that can't be dismissed as the ravings of a sick old man. We need science, not testimony, I said. Exactly. DNA, toxicology, forensic accounting, things that don't care about medical diagnoses or cognitive assessments, things that can't be gaslit. I stared at the report, at Dr. Valdez's signature, at the clinical language describing my supposed deterioration. Every word was based on symptoms the pills had caused. The perfect circular trap. What's our next move? I asked. We get the DNA results that can't be faked, Zandra said, and we do it before they realize we're moving. The next morning, September 12th, we visited 3 independent diagnostic labs across Dallas. Lab Genetics on McKinney Avenue, BioVeritas in the Medical District, Genome Secure near the university. Each location smelled of antiseptic and sterile plastic, the clinical efficiency of modern science. At each lab, I submitted identical sample sets. My hair follicles. Wendy's hair from her bathroom brush collected carefully while she slept. A tissue sample from Wendy's pregnancy medical file, obtained through legal subpoena Zandra had quietly filed. Satutia. 3 independent labs, Zandra explained as we drove between locations. 3 identical sample sets. Results will arrive staggered over 5 days, makes fabrication impossible to coordinate. No single lab knows about the others. If all 3 come back with matching results, it's court-admissible proof. What if the results show... I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. And then we'll know, Zandra said quietly. But we need to know. We need certainty. At the 3rd lab, as I handed over the final sample set, Zandra's phone buzzed. She stepped away, spoke in low tones with someone. Her expression darkened. When she returned to my truck, her jaw was tight. My investigator just reported something, she said. Conrad contacted a lab technician at Biotest Dallas 3 days ago. Familiar connection from college. Requested preparation of backup DNA results, showing you as the biological father dated for the same time frame as your tests. The words took a moment to sink in. He has fake DNA evidence ready. I don't think someone would just counter evidence for every move you make. You submit real DNA tests. He's prepared to submit fake ones. You claim fraud, he claims you're confused, and these forged results prove his innocence. 3 independent labs become your word against his word, complicated by Dr. Valdez's report about your failing memory and paranoid accusations. 3 labs, 3 truths, and Conrad with 3 lies already printed and waiting. He's playing 3 moves ahead, I said. He's been playing 3 moves ahead for 18 months, Zandra corrected. We're just catching up. I drove home in silence, the weight of it pressing down like physical force. Every exit blocked, every move anticipated, every piece of evidence they'd prepared to counter with fabricated proof and medical diagnoses of incompetence. That night alone in my study, I placed 3 sealed envelopes into my private safe. Each contained confirmation receipts from the independent labs. 3 identical tests. Results would arrive over the next 5 days, one by one, each lab operating without knowledge of the others. I didn't know if I feared the results confirming my worst suspicions that the child Wendy carried belonged to her personal trainer, that my son had orchestrated a pregnancy fraud to secure millions, or denying them, which would mean I'd become exactly what Dr. Valdez's report claimed, a paranoid old man seeing conspiracies where none existed. Either way, my family was a lie. The only question was which kind of lie. I closed the safe, spun the combination lock, sat in darkness listening to the house settle around me. Wendy was upstairs sleeping. Conrad was in his downtown apartment, probably planning his next move. Dr. Valdez was in his clinic prescribing pills that stole minds. Nico Delaney was at his gym training clients while carrying another man's child in his lover's womb. Somewhere in that constellation of betrayal was a weak link. Someone who could be turned. Someone whose loyalty was for sale or whose fear could be weaponized. But DNA was only half the battle I needed to know who else was playing their game. The private investigator slid the surveillance photos across his desk, and I saw my opening. Nico Delaney wasn't a conspirator. He was a hostage. Finding the weak link meant understanding who wanted out. The DNA tests would take days to process. Meanwhile, I needed to know everyone playing their game, everyone with leverage, everyone who could be turned. Frank Holloway, 48, private investigator retained by Zandra Gallagher, spread surveillance photos across his cluttered desk with the methodical precision of a man who'd spent 20 years documenting other people's secrets. His office smelled of stale coffee and printer ink files stacked in towers that looked precarious, but probably had their own logic. Nico Delaney, Frank said, tapping a photo. 29. Personal trainer at Prestige Fitness, specialized in high-end clients' corporate wellness programs. Clean record until 18 months ago. The photo showed Nico outside his apartment building alone, shoulders slumped. Not the confident trainer from the hotel security footage. This was a man carrying weight that had nothing to do with barbells. What changed 18 months ago? I asked. From underground poker rooms. Started small, escalated fast. Within 6 months, he was into the house for $43,000. Frank pulled out financial records. Then suddenly, 8 months ago, exactly half the debt gets paid off. $21,500. Transferred from an LLC registered to your son. The pieces assembled themselves with brutal clarity. 8 months ago was when Wendy got pregnant, I said, and when Nico wanted to claim the kid. Frank pulled out another photo, Nico and Wendy arguing outside a coffee shop, body language tense. He threatened to go to you, tell you everything, claim his child publicly. What happened? Your son and wife responded by building a cage. Frank laid out the evidence like a prosecutor. They threatened to expose the gambling to his employer. He'd lose his fitness certification. They paid off half the debt to control him, kept the other half hanging over his head like a sword. And they started paying his rent directly. Made him completely dependent. In war, you don't need to defeat every enemy, you just need to find the one who wants to surrender. He's not a criminal. I said, studying the photos. Nico looked miserable in every shot. Alone at coffee shops, walking to work with his head down. The posture of a man who'd lost something and couldn't get it back. He's a prisoner, and prisoners make deals. Exactly what I thought, Frank said. He wanted his child, still wants his child. But Conrad and Wendy own him through debt, employment threats, and rent control. Classic financial entrapment. I collected the photos, the financial records, the timeline of Nico's imprisonment. This was the weak link. A man who'd tried to do the right thing and been punished for it. A man who still wanted what they'd taken from him. Keep eyes on him, I said. But don't approach yet. I need the DNA results first. Then we move. Frank nodded. One more thing. He keeps a photo of the ultrasound in his gym locker. Locks it away before clients arrive, takes it out during breaks. Stares at it like a man looking at something stolen, a father looking at his child. The child, Conrad and Wendy, had turned into a weapon. I left Frank's office at 5 p.m., drove through Dallas traffic as the sun set, arrived home to another dinner with my conspirators. Smiled. Ate. Pretended the pills were working. Wendy touched my hand and asked if I felt okay. I said I was tired, just tired. That night I barely slept. The next morning, September 13th, I met Xandra at her law office at 9 a.m. She'd pulled the original trust fund documents from secure storage, the legal framework for the $30 million gift I'd announced at the party. I need you to read page 47, she said, laying the document on her desk. Subsection D. I turned to the page. The clause was buried in legal language easy to miss among provisions about distribution schedules and beneficiary requirements. But once I read it, my breath caught. Any beneficiary claiming trust funds for biological descendants must provide independent DNA verification from court-approved laboratory before distribution. So Minerva added this in 2017, Xandra said quietly. 1 year before she died. Do you remember? I did now. A conversation in this same office 7 years ago. Minerva insisting on additional protections for the family trust. I'd thought it was paranoia. Cancer had just entered remission then, but she knew it would come back. She'd been preparing. I forgot this existed, I said. Completely forgot. Wendy doesn't know, Xandra said. Conrad doesn't know. When you announced the trust fund at the party, they assumed it was a standard gift with standard terms. But it's not. My wife had been dead for 18 months, but she was still fighting for me. Even if they kill me tomorrow, I said, understanding flooding through me. The moment Wendy tries to claim the trust for that child, she'll have to prove paternity in court. A court-approved laboratory, independent verification, public record. Xandra's voice held grim satisfaction. The fraud exposes itself automatically. The money becomes the trap. Minerva built a dead man's switch that activates the moment they try to claim what they think they've won. I held the document, my hands trembling slightly. Minerva's signature sat at the bottom of the page, strong, confident, certain. She'd added this clause in 2017, couldn't have known about Wendy, specifically, couldn't have predicted this exact betrayal. But she'd known money always attracted predators. She'd protected me from threats she'd never lived to see. How did she know? I whispered. She didn't, Xandra said. She just knew you'd need protection, and she made sure you had it even after she was gone. I sat in Xandra's office holding a trust document signed by Minerva's hand in 2017, 1 year before cancer took her from me. She had inserted a clause requiring DNA verification for any heir of protection. I'd forgotten a trap Wendy didn't know existed. Minerva couldn't have known about Wendy specifically, but she knew money always attracted predators. She had built a dead man's switch that would protect me even after I was gone. And suddenly I understood I wasn't fighting this war alone. Now it was time to start springing the traps one by one, beginning with the weakest link. I sat in complete darkness at 3 a.m., the envelope from lab genetics trembling in my hands, knowing the next 10 seconds would either restore my old life or confirm I'd been living a 20-year fiction. The traps would spring in sequence. But first, I needed confirmation. The first DNA result had arrived by courier at 11 p.m. I'd waited until the house was silent, until Wendy slept, until the mansion settled. I tore open the envelope. The letterhead was crisp, professional. Lab Genetics, Dallas. Technical language about sample collection chain of custody probability calculations. My eyes went straight to the conclusion. Probability of paternity 0.00%. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. 0, not 0.01, not 99.9, 0.00. Conrad was not my son. I sat motionless. The paper didn't shake because my hands had gone numb. The study's silence pressed against my ears. Through the window, Dallas slept beneath a September sky that didn't care about the destruction of a man's identity. 20 minutes passed. The grandfather clock chimed 3:30, and I was still sitting in the same position. The report on my desk, my eyes fixed on those numbers. 0.00%. Minerva's trust clause hadn't been paranoia. It had been protection. She'd known money attracted predators. She'd built a dead man's switch to protect what she couldn't guard in person. The numb disbelief shifted into something colder, clearer. The father identity that had defined me for 38 years died in a locked study at 3 a.m., replaced by something more dangerous, a strategic observer with nothing left to lose. I remembered the hospital. March 15, 1986. Conrad's birth. Holding that tiny body, feeling overwhelming protectiveness. The weight of him in my arms. His fingers wrapping around my thumb. The promise I made to protect him forever. That memory was poison now. Every birthday, every baseball game, every business lesson, all built on a lie I'd never suspected. The DNA result didn't just confirm fraud. It murdered the past. I folded the report, placed it in my safe, locked it. Then I went upstairs to have dinner with my family. September 14th, 6 p.m. Wendy had prepared roast chicken and vegetables, the wholesome meal of a health-conscious, expectant mother. Conrad arrived at 6:15, still in his work suit, smelling of expensive cologne and lies. "Dad," he said, gripping my shoulder. That protective gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. "You look tired. Are you feeling okay?" Just a long week," I said, smiling. "Your stepmother is taking good care of me." Wendy beamed, touched her stomach. "We're all taking care of each other. That's what family does." I smiled and raised my water glass. To family. Dinner proceeded with theatrical precision. Conrad complained about trust fund delays, demanded earlier access. Wendy played mediator, appearing to defend my timeline. Conrad raised his voice, called her controlling. "You always want to manage everything," he said, fork clattering. "This is Dad's grandchild, not your personal project. And I'm ensuring proper financial planning." Wendy shot back. "Your father worked 40 years to build this wealth. We're not wasting it on impulsive decisions." Back and forth. Perfect argument. Conrad playing protective son, Wendy playing responsible guardian. I watched them perform, noting the timing, the escalation, the calibrated emotions. Conrad placed his hand on my shoulder again. "Dad, you understand, right? I just want what's best for your grandchild." "I know you do, son," I said softly. "I trust you." The word hung between us, meaning completely different things to each of us. Dinner ended at 7:30. Conrad left at 8, kissing Wendy's cheek, the dutiful stepson. I waited until 9 p.m. Then I locked myself in my study and pulled up security footage from cameras Zandra had arranged to install. Hidden devices Cedric had helped position during routine maintenance, so small they disappeared into smoke detectors and vents. I navigated to Conrad's bedroom. Fast-forwarded to 8:15, right after dinner. The footage showed Conrad entering, followed by Wendy. She'd claimed she was resting in the master bedroom. Another lie. Conrad closed the door. They both laughed. Not polite laughter. The kind that comes from relief from successful performance, from fooling an audience. Wendy pulled out a handwritten list. Asset checklist in Conrad's handwriting. They sat on his bed, reviewing it, her finger tracing items, his head nodding. I turned up the audio. Old man totally bought the protective son routine, Conrad said, grinning. The shoulder touch is key. Makes him feel like I care. Your stepmother versus son dynamic is perfect, Wendy replied. He thinks I'm the threat, you're the ally. Classic misdirection. My hand froze on the rewind button. I replayed Conrad's shoulder touch from dinner 3 times, now seeing it as an actor hitting a choreographed mark. Every argument, every protective gesture, every moment of family conflict, all choreographed theater, and I'd been the only audience member who didn't know it was a play. I closed the footage, sat in darkness processing the complete scope of performance they'd maintained for months, maybe years. Then something slid under my study door, an envelope, cream-colored paper. Handwriting I recognized immediately, even though I hadn't seen it in 18 months. Minerva's handwriting. Della. It had to be Della, the only person in this house who moved through the night without sound, who had been waiting 18 months for the right moment to deliver what Minerva had left in her keeping. I opened it with shaking hands. When you see the theater, call Della. She knows everything. March 2023. The date was 1 month before Minerva died. She had written this 18 months ago, predicting the exact moment I would discover the conspiracy, knowing I would need the next piece of the puzzle. My dead wife had orchestrated a revelation sequence from beyond the grave, guiding me through each stage of discovery, like a general positioning troops for a battle she'd never lived to see. I wasn't fighting this war alone. I descended the basement stairs at midnight, following a dead woman's instructions to trust the one person I'd never noticed. Minerva's note had been specific. Call Della. She knows everything. I'd folded the note carefully, placed it in my safe with the DNA results, then walked through my silent mansion to the service stairs that led down to the basement. The laundry room smelled of detergent and fabric softener, industrial washing machines silent at this hour. Della stood beside the dryer, hands clasped, waiting. She'd known I would come. Of course she had. Minerva had told her I would 18 months ago. Your wife saved my life when I had nothing, Della said without preamble. Her voice was steady, quiet, the voice of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. 6 years ago, I was running from a husband who put me in the hospital twice. No money, no job references, nowhere to go. I leaned against the washing machine, suddenly needing its solid support. Minerva found me at a women's shelter, Della continued. Gave me this job, gave me safety, gave me a future. And she told me one thing before she died. If a day comes when he needs someone who owes me everything, be that person. The basement's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Concrete floor cold beneath my feet. The smell of bleach sharp in my nostrils. I've been waiting, Della said. Watching. 3 weeks ago I heard them. And heard who? Mrs. Wendy and Conrad? Laughing in the study about your episodes. About how the medication was working perfectly. About how you'd be declared incompetent within a month. Her hands clenched. That's when I switched your smoothies. The moment crystallized. The glasses on the counter. The quick movement I'd caught in my peripheral vision. You've been protecting me, I said. She knew Mr. Whitfield. Della's eyes met mine. Years before she died, Minerva knew what they'd do to you. Not the specifics. Not Wendy or Conrad. But she knew money attracts predators. She positioned me here as insurance. Told me to document everything if the day ever came. Della wasn't just a loyal housekeeper. She was Minerva's recruited guardian, positioned 6 years ago as an insurance policy against betrayal I couldn't have imagined. Show me, I said. Before I show you what Della had been collecting for 3 weeks, I need to pause. Comment A if you think she's protecting me, or B if she's part of the conspiracy. Tell me why in 1 sentence. Note some details ahead are adapted for narrative impact to convey the emotional truth. Della walked to a storage locker in the corner, one of several lining the basement wall. She pulled a key from her pocket, unlocked it, opened the metal door. Inside 3 cardboard boxes meticulously labeled. "Ah, box 1," she said, pulling it out. Original pill bottles. Every prescription Dr. Vernon Valdez changed over the past 6 months. I kept the old bottles before throwing them away. Dated. Photographed. Chain of custody maintained. She opened the box. Amber prescription bottles lined up in rows, each labeled with dates in Della's precise handwriting. My hands shook as I touched them. 3 weeks of evidence while I'd thought I was losing my mind alone. Box 2. She pulled out the second container. Daily log. Handwritten. Every smoothie I switched. Every pill I replaced with a placebo. Every time they came into your room when you were sleeping. Every conversation I overheard. A notebook emerged. Pages filled with dates, times, observations. September 1st. Mrs. W. added extra powder to morning smoothie. September 3rd, Conrad asked about father's confusion levels. September 8th, overheard them discussing trust fund timeline. Meticulous, systematic, the kind of documentation that would stand up in court. Box 3, the final container. Photographs, security footage backups before they could delete them. Wendy's personal calendar that she keeps in her desk drawer. She pulled out a manila folder. Inside photos of Wendy meeting with Dr. Harrison outside his clinic. Photos of pill bottles in Wendy's bathroom that matched nothing prescribed to her. And a photograph of Wendy's calendar, dates circled in red, with notes: Dad's bad day, planned, Dad dizzy spell, Dad forgetful. She marked your bad days 2 weeks in advance, Della said quietly. Scheduled them like appointments. Planned when you'd be confused, when you'd forget things, when you'd seem incompetent to witnesses. Minerva had built an invisible fortress around me, each brick, a choice she made years before her death. Every pill bottle, I whispered. Every prescription change. Every date Dr. Vernon Valdez came to the house. Oh, Mrs. Minerva taught me to document everything, Della said. She said you'd need proof they couldn't deny. Proof that would stand up in court, proof that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or age or confusion. I stood in that basement surrounded by 3 boxes of evidence that proved systematic poisoning, documented conspiracy, premeditated attempted murder. Evidence that Della had collected while I thought I was alone, while I thought I was going crazy, while I thought no one was watching. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked. Mrs. Minerva's instructions were specific, Della said. Wait until he figures it out himself. Wait until he's ready to fight. Don't give him the weapons until he knows there's a war. She was right. If Della had approached me a month ago, I would have dismissed it. Thought she was confused. Thought she was paranoid. I needed to discover the betrayal myself before I could accept the proof. There's one more thing. Della reached into the locker, pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored paper. Minerva's handwriting on the front, Protocol Omega, open when ready to strike. My hands trembled as I took it. The envelope was thick, substantial. Multiple pages inside. She wrote this 2 months before she died, Della said. Gave it to me with instructions: when he's ready to fight back, when he has the evidence, when he knows the truth, give him this. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside, 15 handwritten pages in Minerva's precise script. A battle plan, step-by-step instructions, bank account numbers, legal strategies, timeline. And clipped to the top, a business card for Zandra Gallagher, corporate attorney. Minerva hadn't just predicted the war. She'd written the victory strategy. I stood in that basement, holding my dead wife's counterattack protocol, surrounded by boxes of evidence collected by a woman Minerva had positioned as my secret guardian 6 years ago. And for the first time in 5 days, I didn't feel alone. I watched from the back booth as Minerva's chosen lawyer slid a folder across the table to the man who destroyed my marriage, and I saw his face go white. The victory strategy had 15 steps. Step 7, flip the weakest link. Nico Delaney wasn't a conspirator, he was a prisoner. And prisoners, when offered freedom, will betray anyone. The Starlight Lounge occupied a quiet corner of downtown Dallas, the kind of place where business deals happened over coffee instead of contracts. I sat 3 booths back, newspaper raised, watching Zandra work. Nico arrived at 10 a.m. on September 15th. He looked smaller than he had in the security footage, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. The confident trainer had been replaced by a man who knew he was drowning. Zandra didn't waste time with pleasantries. Ms. Whitfield has prepared a complete narrative where you orchestrated everything alone, she said, opening the folder. These are the draft messages she plans to give police. Nico leaned forward, read, his face drained of color. I couldn't see the documents from my position, but I'd reviewed them yesterday. Wendy had created a digital trail showing Nico pressuring her into the affair, threatening to expose her to her wealthy husband, demanding money to stay silent. Text messages she'd drafted, but never sent back, dated to look like evidence of months of coercion. The perfect framing of an innocent victim manipulated by a predatory personal trainer. And I never, Nico's voice cracked. She told me her husband was abusive, that we were protecting my child from— Save it, Zandra said, not unkindly. I've read the real messages. I know you wanted to claim your child 8 months ago, and they threatened you into silence. I know about the gambling debt. I know Conrad controls your rent. Nico's hands shook as he held the papers. The same tremor I'd had opening my own DNA results 3 days ago. The physical manifestation of a life collapsing. What do you want? He whispered. Cooperation now earns leniency, Zandra said. Full testimony, recording conversations, written statement. In exchange, I negotiate with the DA for minimal charges, perhaps none if you're credible enough. You become a witness instead of a defendant. And if I don't, silence earns 20 years when she testifies against you. Zandra's voice was clinical. Wendy will cry on the stand. Tell the jury how you manipulated her, how you threatened her, how you orchestrated everything while she was just a frightened pregnant woman trying to protect herself. And a jury will believe her because she's good at performing. Nico sat in silence for 30 seconds. I watched him calculate the angles, realize he had none. What do I have to do? He asked. Zandra pulled out a cooperation agreement, a recording device, instructions. I left the cafe before the meeting ended. Zandra would handle the details. I had other evidence to collect. At 2 p.m., a courier delivered Lab 2's DNA results to my study. I opened the envelope with steady hands this time. No trembling, no emotional preparation, just cold calculation. Probability of paternity 99.9%. Nico Delaney is the biological father of the tested child. 2 labs, 2 identical results. The third would arrive tomorrow, but the pattern was clear. Conrad was not my son. The child Wendy carried belonged to her personal trainer. I filed the report in my safe next to Lab 1's results. 2/3 of the evidence collected. Irrefutable scientific proof. My phone rang. Conrad's name on the screen. I answered with practiced warmth. Son. Dad, great news. His voice carried manufactured excitement. Dr. Vernon Valdez's lab results came back. You're definitely my father, 99.8% match. I knew those rumors were garbage. Rumors. I'd never mentioned rumors. Never expressed doubt publicly. The word revealed too much. They knew I suspected something. That's wonderful news, I said, letting relief color my voice. When can I see the full report? I'll bring it tonight at dinner. We should celebrate, finally put this paranoia to rest. The word paranoia landed with surgical precision. testing if the cognitive suppressants were still working, testing if I'd accept the gaslighting. "I'd like that," I said. "Your stepmother will be so relieved. We all will be, Dad. See you at 6. He hung up. I sat in my study holding 2 documents, one real, one fake. 2 lab results, 2 realities. One built on science, one built on corruption, both heading toward collision in a courtroom. Conrad had moved fast. 3 days after I'd submitted DNA samples to independent labs, he'd already produced counter-evidence from Dr. Vernon Valdez. The fake result would show me as the biological father, complete with official letterhead technical language probability calculations. They'd prepared for this scenario, anticipated my moves, built backup evidence to counter every proof I gathered. But they didn't know about Labs 1 and 2. Didn't know about Della's documentation. Didn't know about Nico's cooperation agreement currently being signed at the Starlight Lounge. They were 3 moves ahead in a game where I was 5 moves ahead. My phone buzzed. Text from Xandra Dunn. He signed everything. Recording attached. I downloaded the audio file, pressed play. Nico's voice shaky but clear. "When did Wendy say Oliver would, you know?" Wendy's voice in the background slightly muffled but audible. "Christmas at the latest. Dr. Vernon Valdez says 6 more weeks of current dosage guarantees cardiac event. The old fool won't survive winter." I played it again and again. 6 more weeks. Cardiac event. The old fool won't survive winter. My wife discussing my planned death like a business timeline. Clinical, casual. The way you'd discuss quarterly projections or maintenance schedules. I saved the file. Added it to the growing folder of evidence security footage, DNA results. Della's documentation, financial records, toxicology reports, cooperation agreements. The alliance was cracking. Wendy planned to frame Nico. Conrad planned to use fake DNA results. Dr. Vernon Valdez provided medical cover. Each conspirator had their backup plan, their exit strategy, their way to sacrifice the others. But none of them knew I had evidence they couldn't counter. Real DNA from 3 independent labs. Real documentation from a witness they'd never suspected. Real recordings of their real plans. They had fake evidence. I had truth. As Conrad hung up, promising to bring his fake results to dinner, Oliver's phone buzzed with a message from Xandra. "Nico signed cooperation agreement. He'll testify Wendy promised to eliminate you by Christmas. Recording attached." I practiced my grateful father smile in the bathroom mirror for 20 minutes. Before dinner, rehearsing tears I'd cry over DNA results I knew were fake. Nico had signed the cooperation agreement. The recording was secured. Conrad was bringing fake DNA results tonight, walking straight into a trap he'd helped build. All I had to do was perform one more time. The dining room smelled of roasted lamb and rosemary candles flickering on the table Wendy had set with our finest china. A celebration dinner. Conrad arrived at 6:30 carrying a manila folder, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Dad. He embraced me, that protective gesture I'd learned to recognize as choreography. "I can't wait to show you these results. Finally put all this uncertainty to rest." Wendy emerged from the kitchen wearing a cream dress that accentuated her pregnancy, playing the glowing, expectant mother. "This is such a relief," she said, touching my arm. "We've all been so worried about you." I let my hands shake slightly as I opened Conrad's folder. The fake DNA report looked official, Dr. Vernon Valdez's letterhead technical language probability calculations. Probability of paternity 99.8%. The document declared me Conrad's biological father with scientific certainty. I let a tear roll down my cheek. Not acting. Real grief for the father-son relationship that had never existed beyond theater. Dr. Vernon Valdez's results prove what I always knew in my heart. I said, voice breaking. "You're my son, Conrad." I pulled him into an embrace, felt him relax into it, believing his own performance had worked. Let's make this official," I said, pulling back. "Sign this DNA confirmation for the estate lawyer, and I'm raising your trust to 35 million. Your mother protected what matters. Now I'm protecting you." Wendy's eyes widened. 5 million more than announced. Conrad's face flushed with greed, barely masked as gratitude. "And Dad, you don't have to. I want to." I pulled out the document Zandra had prepared. It looked like a standard estate confirmation form. Legal language, official stamps. "Just sign here, and initial the lab result verification." Conrad scanned it, quickly saw his name, saw the trust amount, saw reference to Dr. Vernon Valdez's DNA results. He didn't read the fine print that stated he affirmed under penalty of perjury that the attached DNA results were accurate and obtained through legitimate channels. He signed, 3 places, initialed the verification. I witnessed his signature, dated it. September 16th, 2024. The moment Conrad had documented his fraud in writing, adding forgery and perjury charges to attempted murder and embezzlement. We toasted, ate lamb, discussed nursery colors and baby names. I played the relieved patriarch, Conrad played the devoted son, Wendy played the happy wife. 3 actors at a table, each performing for different audiences. The rehearsed tears felt real for a moment. Not joy, but grief for the father-son relationship that never existed beyond theater. Dinner ended at 9. Conrad left at 9:30. Wendy and I went upstairs to bed. She changed into a silk nightgown, brushed her hair, performed her evening routine with the careful attention of someone playing a role. I lay in bed, eyes closed, breathing slow and deep, pretending sleep while the hidden camera in the smoke detector recorded everything. At 10:15, Wendy's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, glanced at me, then slipped into the bathroom. But her voice carried through the door. Zandra's audio equipment could hear everything. "It's done," Wendy whispered. He signed the confirmation, raised the trust to 35 million like I was planning to suggest next week. The old fool is so predictable. Nico's voice came through faintly. I'd heard this conversation already. Nico was recording it per his cooperation agreement, feeding Wendy exactly the questions she wanted to answer. "What about the other plan?" Nico asked. "Well, I created the text chain showing Conrad pressuring me," Wendy said. "Backdated messages showing him threatening me if I didn't cooperate. Police will see a threatened pregnant woman protecting her unborn child from a violent stepson. And the pills is all Conrad's idea in the texts. Him buying them, him switching them, him creating the fake DNR. I'm the victim who was too scared to speak up until it was almost too late. The clinical precision of her betrayal was breathtaking. Conrad thought they were partners. Wendy was building a case that would send him to prison for life while she walked free. What about me? Nico's voice carried an edge of fear. What do I tell them when they ask about... Silence. 3 seconds. The exact length of time it takes to choose between truth and profitable lie. You'll be fine, Nico, Wendy said finally. Her voice lacked conviction. Just, you'll be fine. I need to go. She hung up, returned to bed, curled against me, her hand resting on my chest above my heart, checking my heartbeat. Making sure the pills she thought I was taking were doing their work, I lay motionless. Let her drift to sleep. Listened to her breathing deepen, watched the ceiling fan rotate slowly above us. Wendy's framing strategy targeted both Conrad and Nico. She'd planned to sacrifice both co-conspirators, positioning herself as the sole innocent victim, threatened by violent stepson, manipulated by predatory lover, just a pregnant woman, trying to protect herself and her child. The perfect crime. Except she'd made one mistake. She'd assumed I was losing my mind, that the pills were working, that I didn't know, that I wasn't 5 moves ahead with real DNA results, real documentation, real recordings, and a dead wife's battle plan written 18 months ago. At midnight, I carefully extracted myself from bed, went downstairs to my study, pulled out Minerva's Protocol Omega folder. Step 15. Execute coordinated legal strike on September 18th. 2 days from now, 48 hours. I reviewed the timeline Zandra had prepared. Criminal complaints filed with DA's office at 9 a.m. Civil RICO suite filed at 9:30. Emergency asset freeze petition filed at 10. All coordinated. All simultaneous. All built on evidence they didn't know existed. Conrad would be arrested at his office. Wendy at the mansion. Dr. Vernon Valdez at his clinic. All at the same moment, giving none of them time to warn the others or destroy evidence. I returned to bed at 1 a.m. Wendy slept soundly, her hand still on my chest, feeling my heart beat strong and steady despite months of pills she believed were weakening it. September 18th. The day Minerva had marked in Protocol Omega 18 months ago. The day my dead wife's plan would destroy everyone who'd tried to destroy me. The countdown was over. The blenders were at 6 a.m. had never sounded like a death sentence before. But standing in the hallway, listening to Wendy prepare my final smoothie, I understood this was the sound of premeditated murder. The countdown was over. Tomorrow, September 18th, Zandra would execute Protocol Omega. But today, September 17th, Wendy would make her final attempt to ensure I never lived to see justice. I waited in the hallway, hidden from view, listening to the kitchen sounds. The refrigerator opening, the clink of supplement bottles, the mechanical grind of the blender processing what she believed would be my last meal. Then I walked into the kitchen, playing my role one final time. Wendy turned, smiled, her hand instinctively touching her stomach. The pregnant wife, glowing and maternal. "Good morning," she said brightly. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was true. I'd spent the night reviewing Protocol Omega's timeline, checking equipment, preparing for war. I made it extra nutritious today. Wendy said, pouring the smoothie into my glass, the special glass Zandra had provided 3 days ago. "All your favorites, blueberries, protein powder, the supplements Dr. Harrison prescribed." The glass looked identical to my normal ones, but the bottom had a hidden chamber. When I tilted it to drink, the liquid flowed into the concealed compartment instead of my mouth. An old magician's trick adapted for survival. I raised the glass, pretended to drink, felt nothing touch my lips as the poisoned smoothie drained into the false bottom. "It tastes different," I said, setting it down half empty. "Better, actually, sweeter than usual." Wendy's smile widened. Perfect white teeth. The smile of someone who believed she'd just administered a fatal dose. I added extra honey. She lied. The sweetness was concentrated poison, maximum dosage, designed to ensure this would be the last smoothie I'd ever drink. "And thank you for taking care of me, Wendy," I said, letting emotion fill my voice. "All these years you've been so dedicated." The irony hung between us, invisible to her. I was thanking her for attempted murder while she believed I was thanking her for devotion. The trick glass felt like Minerva's hand guiding mine, 18 months dead, still protecting me, sip by poisoned sip. I finished the performance, set down the empty glass, kissed Wendy's forehead. She leaned into it, playing the loving wife, until the very end. Then I walked to the living room and waited. Protocol Omega required proof of attempt. Video evidence of the conspiracy in action. Della had switched my smoothies for weeks, protecting me. But today I needed to let them think they'd succeeded. Needed to document their response when they believed I was dying. I had 30 minutes before the poison would hypothetically take effect. I sat in my reading chair, opened a book, and waited for the performance to begin. At 7 a.m. exactly, I let the book fall from my hands, slumped forward, made choking sounds. Wendy rushed in from the kitchen. Oliver, I collapsed to the floor, body rigid, eyes rolling back. Every symptom of cardiac distress I'd researched. Wendy stood motionless, didn't scream, didn't run for the phone, didn't drop to her knees. She looked at her watch, not glanced, looked, deliberately, checking the time against an expected schedule. Conrad appeared in the doorway. He'd arrived early, waiting for this exact moment. Wendy, shouldn't we call? Wait, she said sharply. Check his pulse first. We need to be sure before we call anyone. Before we call anyone. Not before the ambulance arrives. Before we call. The phrasing revealed everything they needed to confirm death before initiating their prepared response. Conrad knelt beside me. His fingers found my neck pressed against my pulse point. I'd slowed my breathing, but my heart still beat strong and steady from weeks of clean blood, no poison Della's protection. Conrad's fingers stilled. He felt it. The strong, regular rhythm of a healthy heart. I felt his fingers on my pulse point, counting heartbeats he knew were there, choosing murder anyway. He looked at Wendy. She looked back. A moment of silent communication. Then Conrad reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. I felt him press the power button, holding it down until the device turned off. The small click of shutdown impossibly loud in the quiet room. He pulled my emergency alert pendant from around my neck. The device seniors wear to call for help with one button, slipped it into his pocket. Your whole life you never trusted me, Dad. Conrad whispered, his mouth close to my ear. Guess you were right not to. Not a statement of manipulation. Not a claim that Wendy had forced him. A bitter acknowledgement that this was his choice, his betrayal, his decision to let his father die on the living room floor. 38 years of raising him, 38 years of believing he was my son, all collapsing into that small click sound of a phone turning off. I kept my eyes barely slit, watching through my lashes. Conrad stood, put my phone in his pocket next to the emergency pendant. Looked at Wendy. How long? He mouthed silently. Wendy held up 7 fingers. 7 minutes until they'd call 911. Long enough for oxygen deprivation to cause brain damage. Short enough to claim they'd responded as fast as they could. The perfect window of plausible deniability. The hidden body camera Zandra had installed in my watch was recording everything. The turned-off phone, the stolen emergency pendant, Conrad's whispered admission, Wendy's 7-finger countdown, all documented in high-definition video that would play in a courtroom. They stood over me, my wife, and the man I'd raised as my son, watching me die with the clinical precision of people executing a business plan. Wendy checked her watch again. 6 minutes, 40 seconds remaining. Conrad shifted his weight, uncomfortable but committed. 6 minutes, 20 seconds. I lay perfectly still, controlling my breathing, keeping my heartbeat slow and steady. Through barely open eyelids, I watched them watch me die. Watched them check the time like tracking a stock portfolio. Watched them choose murder with full knowledge and deliberate intent. 6 minutes. The body camera recorded everything. Every second of premeditated murder. Every calculated decision. Every moment of betrayal. Tomorrow, Zandra would file the criminal complaints. But today, I was collecting the final piece of evidence that would ensure they never saw freedom again. 5 minutes, 30 seconds. I lay motionless on the floor, listening to my wife call her lover to celebrate my murder, counting seconds until I'd resurrect and destroy them both. Wendy's heels clicked toward the kitchen. 6 minutes, 30. Conrad called after her. Don't go far. Just making a call. Her voice carried false brightness. We should seem normal when they arrive. I kept my breathing shallow, my body slack. The body camera against my ribs captured everything, the countdown, the phone destruction, the calculated waiting. Evidence so damning even the best lawyers couldn't spin it. Wendy's voice drifted from the kitchen, low and intimate. Nico, it's done. He collapsed right on schedule. A pause. No, the pills worked perfectly. Dr. Valdez's incompetency report will show progressive cognitive decline. Natural causes just like we planned. My chest tightened. Hearing her celebrate my death to her lover while I lay 3 rooms away, Minerva had warned me it would be brutal. She'd been right. The flight's at 11. Wendy continued. Cayman Air just like you booked. I'll meet you at the airport after the ambulance leaves. Another pause, then a laugh that cut like glass. Of course I'm bringing it all. The trust activates the moment he's declared incompetent or deceased. 30 million, baby. All ours. I already packed last night while he slept. 2 suitcases. He never noticed. Footsteps in the living room. Conrad pacing. I cracked my eyelid a fraction. He was staring at the kitchen doorway, face twisted, with something between rage and devastation. No, Conrad doesn't know about us, Wendy said, voice dropping to a whisper. He thinks he's getting his inheritance. Let him believe it until I'm wheels up. Conrad's hands clenched into fists. I'll handle him, Wendy assured Nico. By the time he realizes I'm gone, we'll be untouchable. I've been planning this for... She stopped abruptly. Someone's coming. Love you. She emerged from the kitchen, smile painted on like makeup. Conrad stood in the center of the room, trembling. Who was that? His voice cracked. My sister. She's worried about... Your sister's been dead for 3 years. Conrad took a step forward. I heard you, Mother. Every goddamn word. The air crystallized. I don't know what you think you heard, Wendy began, but Conrad cut her off. Howdy, Cayman Air. 11 o'clock. 30 million all yours. His laugh was broken glass. I helped you kill him. I turned off his phone. I chose you over him, and you were planning to leave me here holding the bag the entire time. Wendy's mask cracked. You were always too weak, Conrad. Just like your father, whoever he actually is. Did you really think I'd split 30 million with you when I could have it all? 4 minutes, Conrad whispered, checking his watch. 4 minutes before we call 911 and you're confessing over his corpse. He's dead. He can't hear anything. Well, but I can. Conrad's voice broke completely. 38 years. 38 years I defended you. Believed you. Chose you. I counted heartbeats. Minerva's plan required perfect timing too early, and they'd recalibrate. Too late, and the 7-minute window would close. 6 minutes, 15 seconds. I groaned, stirred, let my eyelids flutter. Oh God, he's moving! Wendy's performance snapped back instantly. Oliver, Oliver, can you hear me? I blinked slowly, let confusion wash over my features. Looked up at Conrad's face hovering above me. What? What happened? You collapsed, Dad. Conrad's voice trembled. Tears streaked his face, real ones. Just stay still. We're calling an ambulance. You were here. I reached up, gripped his hand weakly. Thank God you were here. If you hadn't been... Conrad, you saved my life. His face crumbled. The man who'd just turned off my phone to ensure my death, who'd removed my emergency pendant, who'd chosen murder, now confronted with gratitude from the father he'd tried to kill. I didn't... His voice fractured. Dad, Shh. I squeezed his hand. It's okay. You're here now. That's what matters. Wendy grabbed her phone. I'm calling 911. Oliver, just breathe. Help is coming. I watched Conrad's soul shatter in real time. Every thank you I offered was a blade. Every grateful look was a twist of the knife. He'd murdered me and failed, and now had to live with my gratitude. Sirens wailed in the distance. Wendy had made the call, probably already calculating how to adjust her story. But the body camera had captured it all: the countdown, the celebration call, the confession over what they'd thought was my corpse. Paramedics burst through the door: Marcus Brennan, 40-something, with kind eyes, and Kelly Sutton, younger, with efficient movements. They swarmed me with practiced precision. BPs elevated but stable, Kelly reported, wrapping the cuff around my arm. Pupils responsive. Sir, do you know where you are? Home. I let my voice waver. I was drinking my smoothie then. Nothing. Any pain, numbness, difficulty breathing. I'm just tired, so tired. Marcus checked my vitals while Kelly questioned Wendy and Conrad. I caught fragments, just collapsed. We were right there. Thank God we saw him fall. Liars. Consummate calculating liars. We're taking him to Mercy General, Marcus decided. Likely cardiac event. We'll run full panels. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I looked back at Conrad. He stood, frozen tears, streaming hands, still shaking from turning off the phone that could have saved me. Thank you, son, I said softly, for being there when I needed you. I'd called him son 10,000 times across 38 years. But as the ambulance doors closed between us, we both knew that was the last time I'd speak to him as father to son. The hospital released me after 3 hours of tests that showed nothing, because there was nothing to find. I declined admission, signed the waiver, and took a taxi home while Wendy and Conrad whispered about contingency plans in the parking lot. The third envelope sat on my desk unopened for 20 minutes. Not because I feared what it said, but because opening it meant the last evidence was complete, and tomorrow I'd destroy everyone I'd ever called family. Lab 3's letterhead was identical to the others. I slid my finger under the seal. Probability of paternity Oliver Whitfield, 0.00%. Probability of paternity Nico Delaney, 99.9%. 3 labs. 3 identical results. 3 irrefutable confirmations that 38 years of fatherhood had been built on Wendy's lie and Nico's DNA. I dialed Xandra. Lab 3 confirms, I said. 0% mine, 99.9 Nico's. 3 labs, 3 identical results, she replied. No court will question it. When I have enough, Xandra. Tomorrow at the will signing, execute protocol Omega. Police will be in the adjacent conference room. The moment they sign the amended documents, we move. Arrest warrants are ready. I hung up and opened my personal checkbook. Not for payments, for the final redistribution of 40 years' work. Whitfield Employee Trust Fund, $40 million. Full controlling shares of the conglomerate to the people who'd actually built it. National Foundation for Senior Financial Abuse Prevention, $27 million. The majority of my personal assets redirected to help others recognize what I'd missed. High Education Trust for Unborn Child Castellano, $2 million. Independent, irrevocable. The child didn't choose its parents. Conrad Whitfield, $0. Wendy Whitfield, $0. I stared at those zeros. 38 years and 14 years, respectively, reduced to nothing on checks that would never be cashed, because there was nothing to cash. They'd plotted to steal $30 million. I'd give them 0 and they'd take everything from themselves. When does a mansion stop being home and become a crime scene you haven't left yet? I looked around the study. Minerva's books still lined the shelves. Victorian literature, philosophy, poetry I never understood, but read because her voice made it beautiful. Wendy had redecorated the east wing, the dining room, the master bedroom. But never this study. It had always been Minerva's. I was just the curator. The grandfather clock. Minerva's great-grandfathers brought from Boston chimed 11:30. September 17th, bleeding into the 18th. The last night I'd spend in this house as a married man, as a father, as anything resembling who I'd been 3 weeks ago. Tomorrow, Zandra would file these checks with the court as evidence. Conrad and Wendy would arrive expecting to sign documents securing $30 million. Instead, they'd sign confessions securing prison sentences. Morning arrived without sleep. I dressed in the same suit I'd worn to Minerva's funeral, seemed appropriate for burying the rest of my family. At 7 a.m., I walked to the garage. 3 vehicles. Wendy's Mercedes, Conrad's Range Rover, and in the back corner, under a dust cover, Minerva's 1967 Jaguar E-Type in British racing green. I pulled off the cover slowly. The paint gleamed despite 7 years of darkness. She'd driven this car every Sunday, rain or shine, windows down and music up. After she died, I couldn't sell it. Couldn't even look at it most days. But I'd maintained it. Oil changes every 6 months. Battery tender. Tires rotated. Detailed once a year by a mechanic who'd known Minerva, who understood this wasn't just a car. I opened the driver's door. Hinges whispered like they had 1,000 times under her hand. Slid into the leather seat, worn to the exact shape of her body. Put both hands on the steering wheel she'd gripped on our last drive together 3 days before cancer took her ability to walk. The car smelled like 7 years of grief condensed into old leather, every mile she drove still living in the upholstery. Her perfume had faded to a ghost, but I could still catch it if I breathed deep enough. Chanel No. 5. The only scent she ever wore. I turned the key. The engine caught immediately, that distinctive Jaguar growl filling the garage. Minerva used to say it sounded like a purr and a roar, having a conversation powerful and gentle at once. The leather was cool against my palms, despite the September warmth. I could taste dust in the air, 7 years of it settling on memories I'd preserved under a cover. After today, I'd have nothing. No wife, no son, no family, no home. Employees would own the company. The foundation would own my wealth. Courts would own my testimony. But this car, nobody knew it existed in any meaningful way. Too little value to list in estate documents. Forgotten by everyone except the man who couldn't forget the woman who'd driven it. Nobody wanted it. Nobody could take it. Nobody would destroy it. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence. Outside this garage, a will signing waited where I'd spring the trap Minerva had built 7 years ago. Where police would arrest my wife and the man I'd called son for attempted murder. Inside this car, Minerva still lived. Every scratch on the dashboard from her rings. Every adjustment to the mirrors. Every memory of Sunday drives where we'd talked about nothing and everything. I stood at the garage door, hand on the handle, looking back at the Jaguar one last time. Inside that vehicle, 7 years of longing grief and the only love that never betrayed me. Outside the final battle where I'd watched them arrested for trying to kill me. I pulled the door closed and walked toward the war. The war arrived in a penthouse boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and 40 witnesses. Conrad sat at the head of the table, surrounded by executives, lawyers, charity representatives, and internal media, smiling like a man about to inherit an empire, unaware I'd turned his coronation into a public execution. Wendy wore an elegant navy dress, hand resting on her pregnant belly, the picture of dignified expectation. Dr. Vernon Valdez, 62, silver-haired. The physician who'd signed my fraudulent cognitive decline assessment sat 3 chairs down, adjusting his expensive tie. Zandra stood near the presentation screen, tablet in hand, face neutral as stone. I entered, slowly playing the part they expected, weaker, older, beaten. The room fell silent. Conrad stood, gestured to the chair beside him. "Dad, we have everything ready. Just a few signatures and... Hi. Thank you all for gathering today." I interrupted, walking past him to the podium. I know you expect a simple will signing, but first I want everyone to understand who this family truly is. Conrad's smile flickered. Dad, this seems unnecessary. The lawyers have everything ready. Sit down, Conrad. Everyone here deserves to see what I've discovered before I announce my final decision. The screen behind me activated. Beautiful family photos appeared: Conrad's childhood, our fishing trips, Wendy and me on our wedding day. Nostalgia flavored the air like expensive cologne manufactured cloying about to curdle. Layer 1, I said. The photos dissolved. Security footage replaced them. Hotel hallway timestamp September 3rd, 2:17 a.m. Wendy pressed against Nico Delaney, his hands in her hair, her leg wrapped around his waist. Gasps rippled through the room. Wendy's face went white. Layer 2. A different angle: Conrad in a parking garage, envelope passing to a security guard. Audio played: Conrad's voice. 50,000. You never saw the footage. You never saw them together. This is insane. Conrad started, half rising. Dad, someone is framing. In Layer 3. My voice cut through his protest like a scalpel. Toxicology report from my cardiologist. The pills I've been taking for 6 months aren't the heart medication prescribed. They're cognitive suppressants causing the exact symptoms Dr. Valdez diagnosed as dementia. The screen showed the pharmaceutical analysis: 2 pill bottles side by side, chemical compositions, highlighted in accusatory red. Layer 4. Dr. Valdez's fraudulent cognitive assessment, dated 3 weeks before my alleged episodes began. Interesting timing. Valdez stood abruptly. The assessment was based on legitimate. Sit down, Vernon. We'll get to your offshore accounts shortly. He sat. Layer 5. Shell company documents filled the screen. Wire transfers, forged signatures, a labyrinth of embezzlement totaling $7 million, all traced back to accounts Conrad controlled. Wendy's hand dropped from her pregnant belly as the evidence cascaded across the screen. The gesture of protective motherhood abandoned the moment her complicity became undeniable. Conrad's jaw clenched. Sweat beaded at his hairline. The heir-apparent posture collapsed into something smaller, cornered. Layer 6. I continued, voice steady as a judge reading a sentence. Audio played. My voice weak, gasping. Can't breathe. Call. Help. Then Wendy's voice, cold and calculating. Wait. Give it 7 minutes. If he's really dying, 7 minutes won't matter. If he's faking, he'll break before then. Conrad's voice on the recording. 7 minutes. I'll turn off his phone. The room crystallized into horrified silence. Someone whispered attempted murder like a prayer. Layer 7. Forged DNR document. Notice the splice marks where they inserted my signature from a previous legal document. Poor craftsmanship, really. Layer 8. Conrad's signature on a fraudulent DNA confirmation, fake results he planned to submit, showing he was my biological son, purchased from a lab technician for $40,000. Layer 9. Wendy's voice filled the boardroom. The phone call I'd heard while lying motionless on my floor. The flight's at 11. Cayman Air. I'm bringing it all. 30 million, baby. All ours. No, Conrad doesn't know about us. He thinks he's getting his inheritance. I'll handle him. By the time he realizes I'm gone, we'll be untouchable. Conrad turned to Wendy, face twisted with betrayal and rage. She stared at the screen, lips trembling. You said he had no proof, Conrad whispered to her. The microphone caught it. The words echoed through the speakers, confession wrapped in accusation. Layer 10, I said quietly. 3 lab reports appeared side by side on the screen, official letterheads gleaming: Lab Genetics, BioVeritas, Genome Secure. 3 independent DNA laboratories. All confirm the same result. The numbers appeared in clinical precision. Probability of paternity: Oliver Whitfield, 0.00%. Probability of paternity: Nico Delaney, 99.9%. Probability of paternity Oliver Whitfield 0.00%. Probability of paternity Nico Delaney 99.9%. Probability of paternity Oliver Whitfield 0.00%. Probability of paternity Nico Delaney 99.9%. 3 labs. 3 identical conclusions. Irrefutable in any court before any jury against any defense. Conrad Whitfield is not my biological son. I said each word precise as a surgical incision. I received these results 9 days ago. You're learning now. Conrad stood frozen, face drained of color. Wendy's mascara streaked down her cheeks. Valdez gripped the table-edge knuckles white. 40 witnesses stared at the screen, at the evidence, at the family that had imploded before their eyes. I pressed the button under the table. The boardroom doors opened. 6 Dallas police officers entered, led by Detective Morrison, 40-something, broad-shouldered, carrying arrest warrants like weapons. Zandra stood, voice clear and final. Conrad Whitfield, Wendy Whitfield, Dr. Vernon Valdez, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement. The metallic click of handcuffs closing on Wendy's wrists was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in 20 years of marriage. This is fabricated evidence. Wendy twisted against Detective Morrison's grip. Someone is framing us. This is a setup. Zandra's voice cut through the protest, like a judge's gavel. Wendy Whitfield, you are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, by poisoning, fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Chakut. Wendy's laugh was glass-breaking. He's a senile old man who can't tell reality from... Save it for your lawyer, Morrison said, guiding her toward the door. Dr. Valdez went quietly, face gray, as ash hands trembling as the cuffs locked around his wrists. The physician who'd signed fraudulent diagnoses for offshore payments, now diagnosed with consequences. Conrad stood frozen as 2 officers approached him. Then something broke inside him, not remorse, but survival instinct wearing the mask of victimhood. She planned everything. Conrad's voice cracked across the boardroom. She told me Dad was abusive, that we had to protect ourselves from him. I was manipulated. She made me believe... Conrad. I said his name once. He stopped, looked at me. For the first time in 38 years, I saw him clearly, a man who'd chosen betrayal at every crossroads, now frantically rewriting history as the walls closed in. And Conrad Whitfield, the officer, began, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. The boardroom door opened. Nico Delaney entered, not alone, but flanked by a private investigator carrying sealed evidence bags. The pool boy who'd fathered Conrad, slept with my wife, planned to run with my money, now cooperating to save himself from accessories charges. Nico wouldn't meet my eyes. Good. I had nothing to say to him. Conrad's gaze moved from Nico to Wendy to the officers, then finally to me. No words passed between us. Just recognition, complete, irrevocable defeat. The empire he'd tried to steal, the father he'd tried to kill, the fortune he'd tried to claim, all gone. Replaced by handcuffs and Miranda rights. They let him out. The man I'd raised for 38 years, walking out of my life in police custody, leaving nothing behind but evidence of crimes and DNA proof he was never mine. The boardroom door closed. Silence settled like dust after demolition. I stood turned to face the remaining 40 witnesses, executives, lawyers, board members, charity representatives. Their faces showed shock, horror, confusion. Some looked at me with pity. Others with something like awe. Shtityaka, I promised to announce my heir today, I said quietly. The controlling shares of Whitfield Logistics, valued at $40 million, go to the Veteran Employee Trust, managed by an independent board. Murmurs rippled through the room. My personal assets established the Minerva Whitfield Foundation for Senior Financial Abuse Prevention. Everything I built goes to those who earned it and those who need protection from what I failed to see in my own home. I watched their faces shift, confusion melting into understanding, then respect. They realized I wasn't choosing dynasty. I was choosing justice. A small independent trust has been established for the unborn child, I continued. Managed by neutral trustees, untouchable by the parents. The child didn't choose this family. Zandra handed me a sealed envelope. I opened it, pulled out a single sheet. There is one spiritual heir to this company, the man who built it with real integrity. I looked toward the door. It opened. Cedric Fields entered wearing a simple button-down shirt, not the executive suits Conrad had favored. 53, lean from years of warehouse work, the logistics operations manager the board had fired 3 months ago for reporting the exact embezzlement we'd just exposed. He walked to the front of the room, unpretentious, silent. This man was fired 3 months ago for telling uncomfortable truths, I said. I nominate Cedric Fields as temporary CEO pending board confirmation vote. Cedric looked at the board members who'd terminated him. I accept. On one condition, complete financial transparency and ethics audit within 60 days. One board member stood. The board who fired you now needs your integrity to rebuild what corruption destroyed. All in favor. Hands rose. One, then another, then all of them. The whistleblower they'd silenced now held the authority they'd tried to protect from truth. I shook Cedric's hand. Not the handshake of executives in tailored suits, but the grip of 2 men who'd built something with honest sweat instead of inherited privilege. Thank you, Cedric said simply. No. Thank you for having the courage I should have had months ago. The board members filed out. The lawyers departed with documentation. The charity representatives left with foundation paperwork. One by one, the 40 witnesses exited until only Zandra and I remained. She set the final documents on the table. Transfer agreements, trust formations, foundation charters. 40 years of building condensed into legal signatures. I picked up the pen. Are you okay, Oliver? Zandra asked quietly. You just gave away $70 million and the company you spent 40 years building. I looked out the window at the Dallas skyline. Whitfield Logistics Tower rose 40 stories, steel and glass monument to everything I'd created. Everything I'd thought defined me. I built all this, I said. Now I sign it away to people who deserve it. Strange, I don't feel loss. I feel light. Each signature removed one chain. 40 years of building cages disguised as empires, now unlocking them all with ink. Employee trust signed. Foundation charter signed. Child's education fund signed. CEO nomination signed. Minerva knew I'd need to let go of everything to be free, I said, setting down the pen. She was right. The papers lay in a neat stack. My entire legacy redistributed in 20 signatures. The weight I'd carried for 4 decades gone, replaced by emptiness that felt nothing like loss and everything like liberation. I stood, walked to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened. I stepped inside, turned back for one final look at the boardroom where I'd destroyed my family and freed myself. The doors began to close. Through the narrowing gap, I saw the city skyline spread below. Somewhere in the parking garage, 40 floors down, Minerva's vintage Jaguar waited, engine cold, ready to take me somewhere new. I drove Minerva's Jaguar from the corporate parking garage to the mansion one last time. The engine purred like she remembered it should, carrying me toward a house that had stopped being home the day she died. The mansion echoed differently when you entered, knowing you'd never return, every footstep a goodbye to ghosts that no longer had power. Della stood in the living room, dustcloth in hand, preparing the house for handover to the employee trust. She looked up when I entered, face lined with something between sympathy and relief. Mr. Whitfield, she set down the cloth. I didn't expect you back today. I came for a few personal items. I walked closer, pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. But first there's something Minerva wanted you to have. Della's eyes widened. Mrs. Minerva! You were loyal to her when she needed allies. And she sent that loyalty to protect me when I needed it most. I held out the envelope. 6 years you watched over me, collected evidence, risked everything because a dying woman asked you to. That kind of loyalty deserves more than a thank you. Della took the envelope with careful hands, opened it slowly. Her breath caught as she read the documents inside. I don't understand. A scholarship fund for your grandchild. Full tuition room, board books, any accredited university undergraduate through doctorate if she wants it. Della's hands trembled. Mr. Whitfield, I can't accept. It's not from me. I touched the documents gently. Mrs. Minerva established this scholarship fund for your grandchild 2 years ago. She wanted me to give it to you at the right time. Today is the right time. Tears spilled down Della's cheeks. 2 years ago, before she knew everything. Who to trust, who to watch, who deserved protection, and who deserved nothing. She saw further ahead than any of us. Della pressed the documents to her chest, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I told her I'd protect you. I promised. You kept that promise, and she kept hers. I squeezed Della's shoulder. Your loyalty to a dying woman is now funding your grandchild's entire future. Minerva planned it that way. Generational impact for generational loyalty. She was a good woman. The only good thing that ever happened to me. Della wiped her eyes. What will you do now, Mr. Whitfield? Something I should have done 7 years ago. Leave. I climbed the grand staircase one final time, hand-trailing the mahogany banister Wendy had imported from Italy. Every fixture, every decoration, every expensive upgrade she'd demanded, all of it designed to prove something that didn't need proving. The master bedroom still smelled faintly of Wendy's perfume. I ignored the king-sized bed, the walk-in closets, the ensuite bathroom with heated marble floors. None of it mattered. One photograph hung on the wall above the dresser. Small, unassuming, easily overlooked among Wendy's carefully curated gallery of social status. But it was the only image that mattered. Minerva and I stood before our first truck, a battered 1986 Ford F-35. We'd bought with our last $3,000. I was 42, she was 39. We wore cheap clothes, my shirt had a frayed collar, her jeans were second-hand. No mansion behind us, no empire, no dynasty, just one truck, 2 people, and belief that sweat plus integrity might equal something worth building. I remembered that day. Late May, humid as a steam room, mosquitoes thick enough to chew. The photographer was Minerva's cousin, charging us $20 for a roll of film we could barely afford. We'd argued about whether we needed the photo at all. Someday we'll want to remember how it started. Minerva had insisted. She'd been right. She was always right. In the photo, her smile was genuine, not the practiced expression of charity galas and board meetings, but the unguarded joy of a woman who believed the man beside her would never betray her. I hadn't, but I'd let someone else into our home who had. I took the photo down, carefully removed it from the expensive frame Wendy had chosen, slid it into a small cardboard box I'd brought from the garage. The frame I left on the floor. Only the photo mattered. Only the memory of that beginning before money turned dynasty into cage. The closets held thousands of dollars in clothes. The dresser contained watches worth more than our first truck. The nightstand drawer had cufflinks, tie clips, leather accessories accumulated across 40 years of proving I'd succeeded. I left it all. The photo weighed nothing but contained everything the moment before money corrupted, when 2 people and 1 truck felt like empire enough. I walked back downstairs, cardboard box tucked under my arm. Della had returned to cleaning polishing surfaces that would soon belong to people who'd earned them through labor instead of inheritance. "That's all you're taking?" she asked, looking at the small box. "It's all I need." I walked toward the front door, past the grand staircase with its imported Italian marble. Past the crystal chandelier Wendy had insisted cost more than some people earned in a year. Past the living room with furniture arranged for showing off rather than living in. Past the dining room table that seated 20 but had never hosted a meal that felt like family. None of it mattered. None of it ever had. I placed the cardboard box on the passenger seat of the Jaguar, my entire inheritance from 40 years of building empires. One photograph. One memory. One moment when love was enough and money hadn't learned to corrupt yet. In the photo, Minerva smiled at the camera like she knew someday it would all be okay. Like she understood that losing everything except the essential was the only path to freedom. She was right. The phone vibrated as I walked toward the garage. I knew before looking that it was Conrad's one final attempt to make me doubt everything I had decided. 3 text messages from a detention center number sent 14 minutes apart. "I'm sorry, Dad. Don't deserve to be your son. No, you won't forgive. Don't ask for forgiveness. Just want you to know, never wanted you dead. Just wanted you to trust me. Everything I did wrong, but that one thing wanting your trust wasn't a lie. Sorry." I read them 3 times. Each word carefully chosen. Each sentence calibrated for maximum impact. Was this genuine remorse from a man facing decades in prison, or final manipulation from someone who had spent 38 years learning exactly which words would wound me deepest? I would never know. That uncertainty would live inside me forever, a scar that could never heal, because I could never know whether the blade was wielded with regret or calculation. Conrad had tried to kill me. The evidence was irrefutable. The switched pills, the delayed 911 call, the phone turned off while I lay dying. Those were facts. But did he regret it now? Or was he simply deploying the last weapon available, guilt disguised as remorse? My thumb hovered over the reply button. Then I pocketed the phone without responding. Some questions never get answers. Some sons destroy their fathers. Some fathers destroy their sons. Nobody gets to know if the apology afterward was real or just another layer of the same poison. You don't forgive. You don't condemn. You carry the uncertainty, like everything else you cannot put down, and you keep walking. I entered the garage. Minerva's Jaguar waited British racing green paint gleaming under fluorescent lights. The photograph of us rested on the passenger seat where I had placed it earlier. The engine caught on the first try, filling the garage with that distinctive purr Minerva had always loved. She said it reminded her that gentle things could still carry strength. I adjusted the mirrors, checked the fuel gauge, and shifted into reverse. The mansion loomed behind me in the rearview mirror, 42 rooms, Italian marble crystal chandeliers, 14 years of expensive decoration, proving nothing that mattered. I barely glanced at it. I drove through the open gate and turned west onto the main road. The September sun hung low, painting the Texas sky in deep orange and gold. I had no destination, no plan, no map. Just open road and enough fuel to begin. The photograph vibrated gently on the passenger seat beside me, 2 young people frozen before everything changed, before the empire, before the betrayal, before the long education that had cost everything. Somewhere behind me, Conrad sat in a cell. Wendy planned her defense. The company ran without me. The foundation distributed what I had built to people who needed protection more than I needed legacy. All of it happening without me. Finally, somewhere ahead, a quieter life waited. No empires, no agendas, no performance of success for audiences who had never cared about the man behind the fortune. Just an old man, an old car, One photograph of the only person who had ever loved him without conditions. It took 70 years to learn that freedom means carrying nothing but what you truly cannot lose. I drove west into the fading light, and for the first time in decades, that was enough. And to you, listening to my story, remember this: sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to watch most carefully. Don't make my mistake. I ignored the warning signs because I wanted to believe in family. I let loneliness cloud my judgment when Wendy entered my life. I gave Conrad power without earning his integrity first. I confused wealth with security and dynasty with love. If I'd paid attention to what people did instead of what they said, I could have saved myself years of pain. The lesson is, this family justice isn't revenge, it's truth. Real family proves loyalty when there's nothing to gain. Minerva and Della showed me that. But Conrad and Wendy taught me that family justice sometimes means walking away with nothing and feeling free anyway. I believe God allowed this pain to show what truly matters, not the empire you build, but who stands beside you when it falls. Dad's revenge stories like mine aren't about vengeance. They're about reclaiming dignity through truth. Remember that when you hear other dads' revenge stories. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Did I do the right thing? Should I have handled it differently? And if you want more stories about family justice and finding the truth, please subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything to this channel. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. As a reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. What's real is the lesson trust must be earned, and true family reveals itself through actions, not words.